Damn. Okay, guys, then I think I'll start a bit early. Cool. Wow. I better make this one good. I've never had so many people in one single presentation, especially for somebody so antisocial as me. So let's start. Well, for those that do not know me, my name is Carlos Perez. I'm from Puerto Rico. I work for a company named Tenable. I work there as a lead vulnerability research engineer. I'm the team leader for the reverse engineering group. I lead a bunch of guys that know a lot of stuff more than I do. I'm really proud of that team over there. I also do this thing called a podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the Paul.com podcast. I'm also the host of Paul.com Español. I also contribute code and develop a bunch of stuff for post-exploitation, a couple of auxiliary modules, plugins, and other stuff for Metasploit. I do admit I'm a Metasploit junkie. So, in fact, I'm trying to not cover so much Metasploit code in this class and just keep it, not this class, this presentation. I'm still in class mode from last night. Some of the commands so you guys can apply it in shell, especially with set. So what is post-exploitation? Post-exploitation is whatever you do once you get a session on a box. A lot of people believe, okay, I got into a box, and depending on the rules of engagement that I have, are the actions that I can do in that box, and many people go, okay, I need root, I need system. Many times you're gonna find out that to get the information you actually need to show risk to your customer, you don't need that. Many times you can get some very, very, very juicy information just by being as a regular user who clicked on your payload, because that's the info that you actually need. In fact, many of the problems that you get when you're doing a bit of post-exploitation is that, or what I've seen happen, is that a lot of people kind of go a bit too crazy in terms of the amount of information that they gather and start gathering info from every corner of the box. They even dump the registry and download the full registry. In fact, I was even in Twitter interchanging some tweets with a guy that was telling me, no, I want to do a full disk image of the target box. And I was going like, dude, that's going to be painful over a network. And nowadays, I don't know about you guys, but when you start doing spear phishing attacks and you start using tools like set and Metasploit and going after the user itself instead of trying to hammer out some of the security in the client, I'm getting so many sessions. It is becoming way, way too easy now to get sessions, especially because there's no patch for stupidity. So I decided I'm not going to break my head anymore just trying to exploit a network. So what I go in with FOCA, great tool from Informatica 64, and I gather all of this information about my target. I find out who has relationship with what are the names of the different boxes, what are the printers, what are the shares, what versions of software they're using. I start going through the forums. I just spend a couple of days just getting information about how my target works, and then I'd send over my sessions. I already have, and just by going through that and going through that bit of planning, I start getting an idea of what type of information I'm going to gather from the get-go when I'm doing the post-exploitation. But one of the problems I'm finding is that I'm competing with a bunch of new companies out there that, because now for PCI and for a lot of stuff, you have a checkbox that you got to go through. And all of these companies are hiring a bunch of people. They give them Metasploit, Canvas, Core Impact, whatever tool you like. They give it to them. They just run next. We got a bunch of sessions. Go in, export report. Here you have, Mr. Client. Here's your pen test. And many times when I try to do the right thing and just talk with the guy who's doing it, go like, dude, you know, you could go a bit further if you actually interacted with the boxes you got shell on. You know, you can gather a bit more information for your customer to have a bit more value. And they're going like, no, I'm a certified ethical hacker. Or even worse, I'm a CISP. I'm a ninja. And they see themselves like this. I'm going into that network, going into all of the boxes, I'm gathering all of this information, I'm dumping their registry, pulling it back, I'm gathering all of the documents that I can find in that box. all of the PDFs, all of the docs. I'm downloading everything by default, setting everything, the auto run script, so I can get all of that info. And they think they look like this to the admin on the incident response team when they actually look like this. They're going after those boxes, they're in the network, they're doing all this noise, and many times you can see the guy from security just going, looking at his screen and smirking like, like going, he's in one of our honeypots, and he's doing everything. I want to see that report. In fact, I was telling a story about this lady yesterday in class. She's a great security professional, and she actually hacked back at the pen tester that was doing the test. It ended up being that the pen tester was using Metasploit, had a database, username MSF, password MSF, and she connected to the password and she started injecting IP addresses in the host table for Disney World. So I do have to say, she's not that great looking, but I find that so hot when I saw that. And the best part is, as the team at that college, at that place, was actually snickering with me while we were having lunch. They were telling me, you should have seen his face when he was doing your report and saying that he got X amount of vulnerabilities, X amount of info, and everything was based on the info we injected into his database. So in other words, what I want to say is, guys, be humble. I see a lot of people doing pen tests and going, I'm a ninja, I don't have to learn from anybody. So I think that goes without saying in this crowd, because all of you guys, if you're here, it's because you want to learn. So this is how it really looks many times what I'm seeing out there, and many people do not know this, but when you're doing post-exploitation and you're interacting with a box, there's this little thing in forensics called the local exchange principle. That means that any interaction that you're actually doing against a box, you're actually leaving a bit of info in it. Even when you're trying to cover your tracks and you're trying to be all ninja and trying to be all stealth, and you're probably using timestamp and doing other methods to kind of hide your presence in the system, you're actually leaving even more evidence, or even though you're deleting some, you're putting in some other. You're always going to be leaving some type of trace in that network, either be it through router logs, your ISP logs, proxy logs. There's always going to be something that is going to be left there. But I do ask for a few, for the sake of our clients, try to be as stealthy as possible for one simple reason. Many times you got to force your client to actually test their stuff. So before going in, an important thing is to actually plan. What am I going to do for my client? Many things that happen with that planning is, sales guy will go in, he'll have a meeting with the client. Client says, I want a black box pen test, internal, external. Remember, you're competing with so-and-so. And here comes the gotta watch my language. Here comes the salesperson and sells a 40-hour pen test. And then comes to you, oh, we got the deal. You have 32 hours to do a pen test and 8 hours for reporting. Oh, and by the way, you got to do externally, internally, and you got to write the entire report. And it's a black box. There's no info whatsoever that the client wanted to give us in terms of business and anything. And you're just looking at him like, I want to wrap my fingers around your neck and just squeeze. So that is part of the planning, working very closely with sales. Making sure that sales involves you in that processing and actually talking to your client to understand the business beforehand and trying to get, I gather so much info on a client just on the sales meetings that many times my enumeration side of the pen test is quite low because I already gathered that information so I can provide even more value to my customer. Another thing is understanding the time frame. I've seen people go way ahead of the pen test. Pen test is 40 hours and you're going all up night, all day, up all night, 3 days working there, consume all of that time, and mistakes start happening. And they're thinking, oh, adding a drop in this SQL statement would be so nice if I were really evil. And then they're so tired after 2 days of not sleeping and putting, instead of typing insert, since the last thing in their brain was drop, they write drop and start dropping tables. Saw that one happen. Very bad. Another thing, when you're playing, do identify your primary targets. Don't go willy-nilly. Right now, one of the problems in this industry is that when we want to do a pen test, everybody wants a checkbox. And we're getting the scope of pen tests are kind of shortening down. Everybody wants it fast, everybody wants it cheap. So going to planning is more effective. This is something very important. Do have a contact sheet, because when you're doing post-exploitation, you're actually interacting with the client system, and many of those systems are going to be in production. And you need that contact sheet in case something goes wrong. And believe me, it has happened to me. Stuff have gone wrong. I remember one day, I tend to script a lot in Metasploit and automate a bunch of stuff, and all of a sudden it was going like, I wonder if there's any additional option for when I run shutdown in Interpreter. And I did shutdown -H, and it just executed in the target box. So I was happy that I had that contact sheet. So stuff do happens. Also, you have to decide what is that initial data that I'm actually going to be needing to be doing my pen test. So you can plan and automate beforehand. Having good rules of engagement with your customer is very essential. What is he expecting? What can I touch? What can I not touch? I remember going into a pen test when I run a Nessus scan and trigger a plugin that says R logging was enabled, and it brought me an ID and the uname of the box. I was in the HPUX box. I was running as root. I go into the box, take a process list, user list, everything, just getting the initial info, and I saw that it was Oracle server running SAP. I remember from my initial meetings with the client that he was telling me, SAP is critical for us. Be careful if you find a SAP box. And ask him why. Because they were a company that made juices and beers in Central America, and every time, if that box goes down, they lose $3 million per hour because of products they have to destroy. So me having that info beforehand in terms of rules of engagement probably saved my ass in terms of doing something stupid on that box that could have got him into a lot of trouble. So planning is important. I do. Those who know me know I tend to be a bit too tactical. So one of the things that I tend to follow is the OTA loop. This was invented by John Boyd, and it goes around observe, orient, decide, and act. So it was originally developed for fighter pilots. It works very well in the close combat arena. It works very well in business, and it even works very well in marriage. Don't tell my wife. And it's very simple. You get a brief amount of information, the exact amount of information or enough information for you to make a decision. Once you have that decision, you will shift what you're doing. You will decide what is the next action that you need to do, and you will execute it. Same thing when we're doing a pen test. We gather the initial information that we want. We want to gather information that will let us know what is this system useful for. Many times the initial information that I tend to gather from a system is quite simple. I do a netstat, I get the ARP cache, I check the sessions, and if there are any shared connections in that box. This will provide me a lot of info in terms of the relationship of this box to other boxes in the network. This will also provide me information by seeing all of these connections with what box it is talking to and on what port. So now I can identify which is the domain controller for that box, or if that box is actually a domain controller and what are half of the clients are connected to it. I can, if it is a file server, I can identify all of the different clients that I can attack against that box and probably do SMB enumeration and know if an auto-run attack will work or probably not. All of this information just by gathering the ARP cache and a netstat and a couple of session connections. I can get so much info in a box. That can give me an idea of how should I move in that network, especially with servers. This is very useful. With client machines, probably not that much, but it does give me some info like the domain controller and file servers and probably printers in that network. But then, especially when we move over to client machines, it becomes even more important to get an application list, and even more recent document, browser history, and the recent applications that were executed in that box. I will show you later on how to do it against Mac OS and do it against Windows. And the information you can gather from there is, should I spend time on this box? Is this box a box for a developer, HR, finance, and then because of the documents they're opening, the types of sites that they're opening, I can identify if several of those sites are actual targets that I can go into the network. And after I know the importance of this box, I can decide, this is a box I want to do persistence on, or I don't want to do persistence on it. I've seen people that get in a hospital 100 sessions, and I don't know what got through their freaking brain that they wanted to do persistent on all 100 freaking sessions. And all of a sudden they have 200 sessions. I'm going like, dude, why are you doing that? Oh, I just automated it. I took the persistent script and just put it in run and ran it against all the boxes and go like, why? What was the purpose of it? You're just making a lot of noise. You're just doing stuff that's going to get you picked up. And by the way, now you got to do cleanup on 100 boxes. I want to see you automate cleanup for 100 boxes with the client. So do decide properly and tactically where I'm going to do what with the information I have. Once I have this space information, I can then proceed and do other stuff. But one of the challenges that we have lately is that we're getting too much info. So now we have to track hosts that were compromised, what is their IP, their OS. This is where it becomes very great, especially with the latest version of Metasploit that's integrated so much into the database, as well as other tools, having a database so we can keep all of that info. Gratis is also great for this because I can keep track of all of this. I can keep track of the credentials I have collected because I've seen cases when people have gotten into boxes, have been able to get a bunch of clear text credentials out of other applications, dump the hash, and then try to crack those hashes and never crosses their mind to use any of those clear text passwords in their word list for cracking the hashes. Seen it happen. And many times when you're sleeping or you're not able to concentrate well, that may happen. So gathering information, having an actual plan that you'll follow, it is quite useful. A caveat that I found is that many times when you're going, I have found people that actually tell me, we only compromise one single host. And there was a junior pen tester, and I was talking with him. And the reason that happened is that all of his boxes that he compromised were behind a NAT, and the only IP he was seeing was the IP of the NAT. I've seen this happening a lot. So do be careful, do gather the information from the host. Do not use the information from the sessions you're getting to identify those hosts. Just a small tip. I've seen it happen with Metasploit several times. Metasploit is great, but you do know how to use it and where to look for the info that you're going to need. And another note, be careful. I worked for Hewlett Packard for 11 years doing penetration testing, assessment, and data center designs. And one of the things I noticed was that each country has its own law when it comes to security. So be careful, especially when you're capturing voice data and user and password information that probably are not for the customer systems. One has to be very careful because one of the things I'm seeing a lot lately, seeing a lot lately is that a lot of people are actually putting in their network their home computers. Or a lot of people are connecting to their own chat or their Facebook webpage. And if you gather those credentials, you got to be careful if you're actually allowed to use it or not. So do ask your customer to actually provide you their policy and state what are the rules. Because at the end, make sure that in your contract, you're actually acting on behalf of your customer when you're accessing that data. So you'll be covered under the same policies. Couple of notes of stuff that I've seen lately. Do know your opponent. IT guys many times are underappreciated. I have gone into organizations when the IT guys are named, oh, the internet guy or the internet people. Oh, they're the ones that provide me internet. So many times they're frustrated, underappreciated, and mad. And when you go in and say, I'm the guy who's going to do an audit, you'll see him put that face. if so, many times they'll see it even as a challenge when you're doing a pen test to make your life living hell. So if you make noise, they will look for that noise. Once they go into that box, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to check for processes, connections. They're going to go into the event log and check for events in that box. And I've even seen some cases when they're actually doing a memory dump while I'm inside the box to see what am I doing on that box. Not all companies have incident response teams. Many of those even have dual functions. You're the incident response team, you're the Exchange administrator, you're the AD admin, and you're the Cisco guy. And we're only going to pay you $35,000 a year. And you see that person pretty mad. So do be careful where you're setting your session, where you migrate to. If all of a sudden they see Notepad doing a connection to the internet or doing a connection to some host somewhere in the network, that is going to raise flags. Also decide on what port are you going to be doing your connection. Port 80, 443 or known ports for connections are the preferred ones. Using delete one is not that good if you're trying to be stealthy. So let's start going a bit about gathering information. I'm going to cover about Windows targets. I'm going to target about OS 10 and why I think OS 10 is a pen tester's post-exploitation delight and why I like popping OS 10 boxes. In Windows, when it comes to Windows, not all versions of Windows have all the commands you want. A good example is the schedule tasks command. You're going to find out that Windows Vista, Windows XP and up, they have it, but when you go into the home versions of it, it's not there. So you script it or you automate it, make sure that you're actually checking if the executable is there. Another thing that I noticed is that in versions of Windows, the registry keys changed their case. This is so freaking annoying. So do tests. Microsoft is not the best at keeping a standard way of doing stuff and command options. I have even found commands that the options actually change from version to version of Windows. And I've even seen some of those, like who am I, change in Windows XP. Windows XP with no service pack, like on a hospital system for punching in. Well, who am I is not there, but if you go into a box that has had service pack 2 or further, who am I was going to be there so you can identify your stuff. So plan ahead of time, probably reading the registry to get the username, the current username from the HKey current user Hive, stuff like that. Do consider it. Windows is a hodgepodge of different versions, different flavors, and commands and registry and stuff, and them change with that. Even the event log. If you go to what I call old versions of Windows, anything before Vista, you have a certain specific sets of event IDs, information that is actually logged. And then when you move over to a more modern version of Windows, all of those IDs, they decided to change. All of the error codes, they decided to change those also. So they're completely different. And in fact, if you go into Windows 2008 R2, even by role, they will have their own versions of their own event log files with their own information gathered separately. So that makes event log a really good target. The registry is a gold mine of information. You can get all of the OS settings for the box. You can get group policy, application settings, application lists. The registry is a complete gold mine. And one of the things I like about the registry is I can read whatever I want in a box, more than likely through the registry, and I will not raise any flags. Because if somebody wants to detect somebody reading the registry or mocking inside several registry keys trying to get access, you got to set group policies, you got to create ACLs to actually let you know that somebody's looking at those or somebody's trying to look at those. Because the only metadata that is safe inside the file for the maze when you're interacting with that registry key is when you actually write to one. And then the only thing that gets modified, it's the key, not the value. So whatever the forensic examiner will have to go in there and figure out which of those values was the one modified. And to get that info, you need to either write your own Python script, or you need to write your own WMI script or PowerShell script, or have another tool that will give you that info to get that date out of that registry. So the registry is a goldmine in terms of just going under the radar. just go in and read. Even boxes with Windows 7 and UAC enabled will let you read most of the registry. If you want a cool, there are a lot of cool places to look. One of my recommendations is going to the Microsoft website and just do a search for group policy settings, and you're going to be able to download an Excel file that Microsoft provides for you for free with all of the group policy settings for all of their versions of Windows. So that means that you can get probably the information of any setting of a box. It's going to be there, and it's going to tell you where to look. So that information is quite useful, and Microsoft's already given it to you by free. One gotcha when you're doing pen testing that I've noticed recently with the advent of 64-bit machines, do be careful when you're running your payloads and information. If it is a 64-bit box, run a 64-bit payload. If it is a 32-bit box, you only can run 32-bit. Here you can see an example where I have 2 interpreter sessions against one single box, a Windows 7 box. You're going to see on the first one, the architecture is x64, interpreter x64. We're golden. The other one, when we look at the architecture, it is telling us that the current process is 1264, and when we look at the interpreter version, we can see that's x86. But a lot of people say, oh, it's working. I'm getting information to what I need. That will not affect my data. That will not affect me anyway. I can still run most of the commands. Well, there's a gotcha, especially with the registry and files. Here's an example where I'm listing the software key under HK local machine. You're going to see that under 32-bit WOW64, I enumerate 16 keys. Under full 64-bit, I enumerate 14, but there's a key in the end called WOW6432 node that I don't see at the other side. And the software lists do not match. I'm seeing software on one side that I don't see in the other. But when I enumerate that WOW6432 node, I see the other software that was seen in the previous list, and even a bit more of information. So running the proper payload under the proper context of the architecture of the box can make or break a good post-exploitation in terms of the information we can gather out of that box. Another problem that I see many times if people are hard coding in their script or tools, control set or control set 01 or control set 002 to get information out of the system key under HK local machine. The problem is that that key gets created on boot up, and that key changes. I have gone into boxes that the current control set 1 is the one who has the information I need updated with the latest information and hardware that is connected to that box and software that is actually on that box. And then in other cases, the user rebooted, I got persistence connected back to my box, I'm back in the box, and it's now current control set 02. So how do we determine this? Just simply go into HK local machine system, select. There's going to be a key called current, and it's going to tell you by number 1, 2, or 3 which ones of those control sets is the one that you're supposed to be targeting to get your info. Just small tips when you're working with Windows and small gotchas that have given me headaches before that I don't want them to give you guys headaches with. Automating the extraction of the registry in Metasploit is quite easy. One of the things that you're going to see is that there's a mixin for this under lib msf core post Windows registry that has all of the different calls that you can do. And in fact, you can create documentation for it that will tell you how to use it in your interpreter scripts or post modules. Generating documentation in Metasploit is quite easy. The only thing you got to do is, in this case, rdoc, the path of the registry file, and then I give it a -o, and where do I want it to generate the documentation for me. You can do this with all of the mixins in Metasploit, so you can get all of that documentation, so you can start writing your script and modules to get the info. A couple of keys to focus on is the Explorer key under HK current user software, Microsoft Windows current version. This key will hold a lot of juicy information for you. It will hold the last commands entered to the run dialog box. Anything you type in run is going to be saved there. It is going to save the last 10 to 15 entries depending on how the box is configured. There's the open dialog box and the save as dialog box. The save as dialog box, every time you do a save as, it will save a history of the last 10 files saved by extension. So in other words, when I go under that key, I'm going to see a bunch of .exe, .text, .xml, .xls, and I can then enumerate all of those documents. What will that tell me? What is this user actually looking at? And it will actually tell me the order that this person was actually using that. It will actually tell me what are the applications this user is executing. I know that there's this thing called prefetch folder in most client machines. The only problem is that for prefetch, you need to be administrator, or you need to be system, or you need to disable UAC on some of the more modern versions of Windows. So going here will give me that information without having the hassle of having to do a privilege escalation of that box. And again, I'm dealing with the registry. I'm reading a bunch of stuff that is getting logged nowhere, unless they have a sniffer or an IPS between me and that box. I can also get a list of the latest executables that were ran, but one caveat, different versions of Windows save the data in different formats, as I mentioned before. Anything 2000, 2003, and XP will save it as clear text or a string in the registry, but when you go to Windows 7, 2008, 2008 R2, or Windows Vista, it is saved as a binary blob, and the problem with that binary blob is that the versions of Vista and Windows 2008 use different formats for it. So there's a bit of a gotcha there. My recommendation is, even if you pull that binary info, you're going to be able to see the path for the executable and the name in that binary. It's quite easy to extract with strings. Here's a list for each one of those different keys. I do find this to be a gold mine in terms of information. Sometimes I do see some weird stuff, especially when it comes to .avi files and .jpegs. And I've downloaded some stuff that I wish I could forget. I wish there was spring bleach. The worst porn is Japanese porn for some reason. The Windows event log. This is another gold mine of information that I don't see a lot of people harvesting. You can go in there and you can find what is actually being logged. Every time you set an ACL or something to be audited, it is going to be saved here. And more than likely, you're going to be able to read all of those event logs, and you can filter them, and you can work with them. In fact, they can even give you more information. On the most modern versions of Windows, it is a XML binary confile file, similar to a pill list in OS X. They're saved under HT local machine system current control services. There's a key called event logs. Do be careful. Modern versions of Windows, it is capitalized. It is capital E event log. And on prior versions of Windows, everything's lowercase. This is one of those examples to get a list of all of the event logs in that box. When you're one of the things I've been seeing recently in targets, especially in those using the latest version or the beta version of System Center Configuration Manager, is that if when I go to WinRM and I start playing with the settings, I can see that they're shipping their event logs to another box. This is a good indicator on the level of expertise of your target. If they're actually sending their event logs somewhere, that means that they have a clue or at least an idea on how to secure the environment. That will give me an idea that there are possible countermeasures and stuff in that network that I gotta be careful of. Plus, it will give me a target if I decide to be noisy that I need to attack and compromise, so I can show to the client the risk. I got into your server with all of your that receives all of those logs. I can control it. Do look for the service WECSVC, and if it is running. If it is running, then you can use the WECUTL. You give it the option of ES, and it will enumerate any subscription or event logs that I'm receiving on that box. If I give it a GS, it will give me even more information, and it will tell me to what box am I sending it to, and if I'm using HTTPS or not, sending those event logs. For the event log, I wrote a tool called Event Manager. It is a script in Metasploit that you can use to list them, get the information out of them. One of the things you got to be careful when you're dealing with the event log and the client in the rules of engagement say, we want to test our incident response, you're allowed to cover your tracks and you decide to delete the event logs. In Windows, prior versions of Windows before Windows Vista, you can clear any event log and nothing is logged that it was cleared with the exception of security event log. On Windows Vista and above, you clear any event log, there's going to be an event log left telling that the event log was cleared. They got a bit smarter on that. And they tied in a bit the permissions on those. So this is the tool I wrote. It gives us several abilities. I can list the event logs, what are their settings in terms of retention, size, how many events are on each one of those. Another thing I can do is I can dump and filter by event ID that data. So I can check, are they doing any ACLs against the registry? Are they monitoring failed logons or not? Are there, did they enable certain stuff in the file system to audit any access to certain files? And plus gives me an idea on their level of knowledge, plus what that box is actually doing and being used for, because I can see an event log for the AD system, I can see an event log for JCP, I can see an event log for any of the other services, and I haven't touched much of that box in terms of commands in the file system. And I can export everything into a CSV file that later on I can bring up in Excel and manipulate. One thing a lot of people do not know is that the search function in Interpreter and most modern versions of Windows will use the indexing server. So it will not touch the hard drive. It will go after the indexing servers and get the info. But two special notes here are that I can also search Internet Explorer history. That is very, very, very useful to find out what that person's actually accessing in that network. Another one is the Outlook MAPI API. That will I can search through their emails for stuff like password or specific names or specific information inside their emails, and it will let me know what is the PSD file that holds that info. OS 10. Recently, I've been getting a lot of sessions in OS 10 thanks to Dave with SET and some of the improvement in the Java payload. And I know there's not much information in OS 10 when I start getting this session, so I started looking into it. And I do have to say OS 10 is a pen tester's delight. I can get so much freaking info out of an OS 10 box. They give it to me in a silver platter. I don't have to deal if it's binary, not binary, or this version, this other version. Everything's, they just make it easy for you. Just give it to you in a silver platter. It's hard to find actual OS 10 users that will not click on stuff when you fish them. It's actually even harder to find an OS 10 user that will use antivirus. So that makes them a great target. Even though I use OS 10, and I think Lion is Apple's Vista, one of the things, I started using it believing that it was Unix, and one of the things I noticed is it is not exactly Unix. So a lot of the commands that I can use in Linux, HPUX, Solaris that tend to work quite well against many boxes do not work that well in OS 10. And many times when I go into the Etsy folder and get a bunch of files, I'll be like, yeah, I got the info I wanted. And it's not there. Just a placeholder. Doesn't have nothing. And it even includes for you a screenshot tool. So you can take screenshots. Where do we get most of the information? Out of this file file format called plist. Plists are like OS 10 registry. they save all of their settings for the box and their applications in this file. This file is actually a plain text XML document many times, and depending on the application, the age of the application, most modern OS X applications will have that file compiled into a binary. And many times you'll find they even have data structures that are encoded in base64, and the data inside is just a binary blob that then you'll have to process. Just a bit of caveats, but Apple is so nice that they have included Python on all of their OS X boxes. And the Python guys have been even nicer that they included a library called plist that will let you parse plist files. So the only thing you get to do is write your own Python script and upload it to the box, and you can do wonders in that box. The command that you tend to use to get information out of plist is called defaults. The path for the file, you'll see it there, USR, bin defaults. As you can see, it's under bin, so anybody in the box can use it. You need to be an administrator. You can, if you find a binary file, you can convert it back into plain text XML format pretty easily with the command plutil. I can do a convert and convert it into XML format. One caveat, it is not actually XML. Apple's just so special. It takes a while just to parse it properly, so if you want to use that library, you can use it. And when you start playing with them, you'll notice what I'm saying. In the way they structure data, where under one single key you have the key and data, and they're not related to one another. They're just, the information, the way they do it is just the relation is just the order in where they're found. The key on top, data below it means that it belongs to this key, instead of doing it the proper way. Just Apple. One of the things I like is getting the list of recent documents. I had to trim mine. I did not want to embarrass myself when I was doing it on my machine. On OS X box, the information you can gather are called domains. So one of the things you can do is do defaults domains, and it will tell you all of the different parameters, including applications that you can query and get information out from for that system. So one of the things that you can do is you do defaults read, and then you pass to it com.apple.recent items, and you give it the key that you want is the recent documents. And then that will provide a bit of more information than usual, and what you want is the one that's called the name. And there you can see the name of all of the application, of all of the files that I recently opened in my MacBook at that time. Okay, let's go here. Another thing that you can do is you can also do recent applications, and you can get a name of all of the applications that were recently executed and the order they were executed on, so you can know what that person's actually using on that box. Because I do have to admit, on several of the Lion and Snow Leopard boxes, one of the things I've seen is that people are becoming app whores. They download whatever they can from the App Store and not use it. So if I do a list of all of the apps, I get this big, humongous list of applications. I'm going like, wow, he does have a lot of money. But when I look at this list, it's only using 3 or 4 of those apps. Another great piece of information is I can get the recent host that this box has been talking to. As you can see, it will even be nice enough to tell me if it was Apple File Protocol, FTP, or SMB, the box I was accessing. So that's very good information in terms of what other boxes can I attack. And many people will say, oh, but that only gives me the last 10 recent documents. Well, Apple is so nice, and they want to help us. I was going to say fuck their customers, but I would say it's not the proper word. I say get the proper information to show value to our customer. That they'll let us, that they created also separate playlists after Leopard, Snow Leopard, and Lion that will save the last 10 to 15, even 20, depending on the application and how it is configured, of the recent documents per app. In fact, I'm going to be pushing a post-exploitation module next week or the week after on it that I've been writing for this. I was going to show you the VLC recent list from Paul's machine, but I was told I was not allowed to. Another great tool to get information is mdefine. Why? Because when I'm working with the recent document list, one of the things I noticed is that they decided to put it in a base 64 blob, then in a binary blob. That binary blob started changing, telling me the path of stuff. I go like, oh, Apple, you were being so nice until here. And then one of the things I noticed is that there's a tool called mdefine. mdefine actually uses the spotlight index. And boy, is that thing powerful in terms of the info I can gather from it. So when I go into mdefine, it is USR bin, mdefine. One of the things I can do is I can search by metadata attributes on documents. So I can grab a Word document, Excel document, I want to see the type of metadata that each type of document saves. I can do an MDLS on the file, and it will give me that list for me, so I know what to look for. And then the only thing I can do, if I want to find, let's say, passwords, or I want to give it a regex with the, let's say, the pattern for a credit card, or the pattern for a social security number, I just do mdefine, bracket, and then I put inside the regex. And I'll get the info like that on all of the documents that contain that pattern. So that's awesome. Thank you, Apple. So I can also limit it to what path I can find. Here you can see an example. As you can see, I can use several operators just like in the C language. Another language, I can search for content type only Word documents or content type PDF document, and I can give it a regex to get more information. That way I'll only get the Word and the PDF documents. So I can use that to kind of further my search. Another thing I can do is I can use keywords like iCal, to do, music, audio, and I can give it those kinds of keywords to kind of further my search on what I want to download from that box. Also, I can give it ranges. I want all of the files that were this week, this year, today, yesterday, tomorrow, month, week, year. So as you can see, it makes life quite easy to find the information you need out of that box. And I don't need to be root. I don't need to break my head writing Apple script that will simulate the asking for permissions for a setting to do a false task and have the user save it, and me then reusing that to do a sudo and get in. Done it. It's quite easy to do, but I don't need to do it. Thank you, Apple. Another tool that is great, that is called the system_profiler. This will give me all of the settings of the preferences set on that box. And I don't need to be root. And here you can see different types of information. Just go system_profiler in the data type. I can get the OS. No networks. What have been all of the access points that you have connected to? Or networks that you've connected that giving you different IP addresses, and what was that IP address that you had on that network? A recent list of those. I can get a list of applications and the version and even the subversion of that application, where is it placed, and the date that it was installed. I can get information on development tools, frameworks. I can get information what are you actually logging and where. I can get the preferences panes, anything that you have set up for startup that I could possibly modify so I can get persistence on that box. It will just give it to me. You just need to ask. Information on the firewall, airport, USB, printers, anything. It will give me anything I want without any problems, without having to bang my head. But this is the coup de grace, what I really like in post-exploitation Apple boxes. If I get access to Leopard or Snow Leopard, they save their shadow passwords by default under Salted Shell 1. That tends to be kind of hard to break, but they're so nice for us that if we decide to enable SMB sharing, it will save an SMBNT and a landman hash for that password. If you look in the framework, I wrote a post module that will dump it and will create separate files for each one for you. And I even have my own Python and Ruby script on my website. On OS X Lion, it's a bit different. They're using a salted SHA-512 with a 4-byte salt, but they're so nice that they'll even save the SMB and T. And another thing, if you've been doing upgrades from leopard, snow leopard, lion, it will retain the landman hash, so you're able to get it. My wife was surprised that I got her password. She didn't know how. And I can even get the password policy, and I can, if I want to know what hatches are actually available for a user, I can use the password policy command. I can just tell it get hash types minus -u user, and it will let me know. This makes life for cracking passwords a lot easier, but if even wants to be more easier, thank you, Apple. One of the things you can do is that on Lion, you can get the shadow hash or the shadow information without needing to be root. It will give you that info. I found that so going like, oh, this is worse than Vista and Lion. And looking at that and just banging my head in surprise, I started to test it against my leopard, snow leopard, even my tiger boxes. Tiger didn't work, but leopard, snow leopard, and was going through data. Oh, they're secure here, but why not in the latest version? And as I was looking through all of the data, I noticed one piece of information in my wife's box that was password hint. It was actually giving me on all the versions the password hint that the user set for the password. Doesn't give me the hash, but it's giving me the freaking password hint. What most users do, they put their password in the password hint. Or in the case of my wife, el nombre de mi hija, the name of my daughter. So that was quite useful, and that comes very useful when you're trying to do post-exploitation, you're trying to break those hatches. So thank you, Apple. Other useful OS X commands is they provide for me a screen capture command. I can grab a screenshot of the box as a JPEG. One of the things to keep in mind, you need to be admin to run this. Another thing that I can run as any user is a command called pbpaste that will give me any text that is actually in the clipboard. Thank you, Apple. And if I want to get the effective password policy so I can know how to tweak and play with my password cracking rules, I can get all of that information with the pw policy file, and I can run it as any user, and it will give me the policy. Another thing is that if I'm creating files in the temp folder and doing stuff, and I want to make life harder for the IT guys, I can use the secure SRM command. Before that, I used to upload my own precompiled binary, and after talking with a forensics guy, he told me use the one included with OS X, because the one that is included with OS X handles some specific stuff that Apple decided to change on HFS. Apple special. Post modules that you can use to automate all of this shenanigans, or whatever you want to call it. There are a couple of post modules I wrote. One of them is the run console RC file. This post module will let you set console commands for interpreter, get UID, sysinfo, and you can just set a list and just run this command. This is kind of like a poor man scripting. You can create your own little scripts that you can feed over to this post module and run against sessions. Another one is multi-command. This one will actually run shell commands on the boxes. It will run those shell commands in the order, and all of the info that it gets back, it will be saved into loot in Metasploit. A great one I wrote for Ed Scotus and McDouglas is delumic_command. This will allow you to run WMIC commands on target boxes in Windows, and you can get even more information that you can from an Apple from WMIC that you can in Apple, believe it or not, even though Apple's just pulling their skirt up and giving away everything. No. Interpreter scripts, there are several of those. You have the multi-console command, multi-script, WMIC. They kind of mimic what the post modules do. Interpreter scripts are going away, so start using the post modules, but I do mention it because a lot of people still like the scripts and probably do save a copy for the day that they're removed, so you can keep it for you to use on your own private pen tests. But one of the things that I noticed is that as I was getting so many sessions on Apple devices, in addition to Windows, I needed to interact with a lot of sessions at the same time, and the framework did not provide me that flexibility. I can do it, it is kind of a bit difficult, but I wanted to automate it even more. So I wrote several plugins. You can find them in my GitHub site. If you go http://github.com, darkoperator, you'll find them there. I wrote several plugins for the latest version of the framework. There's one that will send you a direct message through Twitter every time you get a session. Another one will send you a growl message if you're running macOS. And there's a special one that I wrote called Post Auto, or Post Automation. What will this do? It will let me run any post module I want against a specified number of sessions I give it, or all sessions, and it will check if that post module is compatible or not with that session. So we'll do all of the checking. Another command is the interpreter console one. I can run interpreter console commands. I can give it a list of commands to try to automate everything. And I added some commands for gathering system credentials, application credentials out of target boxes. Again, I can give it a list of files where to run. When you download it, place it in your root folder, in your home folder, MSF4 plugins. To load it is quite easy. You just do a load post_auto. It will load. Then you can do a help or a question mark in your MSF console, and you will see under post commands all different commands and stuff that you can do. And this can be executed against all sessions or a given number of sessions, and it will check compatibility against those if it can run those commands or not. So this is quite useful when you have a bunch of sessions or shells, especially syscred1 and the app creds, so you can get all of those credentials out of those boxes. Now here's an example of how they look. Each one of them does have a help message that will give you everything. Some recommendations on detection. Look for session times, very long session times that will give you a lot of info. Again, check your event log, centralize everything. Do not trust everything on logs. Do check traffic. There's so much info in the traffic when you kind of combine it with the event logs. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope that you guys found the information useful. I know that I just ranted a bit through it, and I hope that when I went technical, at least I did provide you guys with some good technical info for when you're doing your post-exploitation.